So I think that one of the good things that have come out of COVID are that parents are starting to realize that they have not been raising their children. And I've not always, but at least within the last 5 years, and definitely since having a kid, I have felt that it doesn't really make sense to have children if you aren't going to raise them. That being said, like, I was definitely not raised by my parents. My parents were both career people. They ended up getting good paying jobs with pensions and healthcare for the rest of their lives, and that's great. But the downside of that is that my sister and I were definitely raised by daycare workers and then eventually state schools. And I think that over the last several generations, since it's been normalized to start dropping your children off at daycare starting as young as 3 months old. I think a lot of people don't realize that a lot of daycare centers will start taking children that age, but that's when a lot of mothers go back to work, is 3 months after they've given birth. And then, they stay in daycare until they're about 3, and then they go to preschool, and then they go to kindergarten, and then they go to high school, then they go to, elementary school, middle school, high school. And all of that time they are spending 7 or 8 hours every single day, basically being babysat even when they're in school. I think at this point, especially when you have like 25 to 30 students in a class, it's like basically you're just kind of trying to get through material while making sure that they don't kill each other. And I have heard a lot of people that were teachers or are teachers talk about how as time goes on, children have been less and less well behaved. And I think that is partly because parents are less and less involved in their children's lives. And I think the long-term social repercussions of not being raised by somebody who cares about you beyond a paycheck, not saying that people who work in daycare centers and things don't care for children, but it's kind of like giving your car to a valet. Like, they have a vested interest in making sure that your vehicle does not get harmed, but they are never going to care for your vehicle as much as you do. And you need to keep that in mind when you're handing off your kids to people that you're paying minimum wage to watch them. I mean, it's not a good situation for them, because most of the contact that they're having in a given day is going to be with people that, I think a good example is like when you have a baby and it's your baby and they've got boogers coming out of their nose, or they've, pooped all over something or something like that. It's not real pleasant to clean up after them, but there isn't like that. If you've looked after someone else's children, there's a little, you want to say that this isn't true, but it's more gross. It's more gross to deal with somebody's baby who is not related to you and to clean up after them. And that's just kind of a biological thing. Like, your own family is less gross to you than other people's family or strangers. And so you're putting your children in a situation where they are dealing with people that are going to react to them, I don't want to say like more in disgust, but kind of like, who are not going to be able to be as good of caretakers because they're not biologically programmed to be that child's caretaker. And I think that since the 70s, we've seen a lot of kids, myself included, that were raised, with, there's also less physical contact, less, you're not prioritizing those kids. It's never going to be as good as a parent looking after a child, especially in those first 3 developmental years. And I'm not saying that like you should never send your kids to school, or that preschool is bad, or any of those things. I'm just saying that if you are not making a concerted effort to be the majority influence in your children's lives, that's probably going to negatively affect them in the long run. And of course that's not always going to be the case if you're like a horrible parent. But for the vast majority of people, as a general rule, it's always going to be better for kids to be raised by their parents. And I think something that I've realized since having a baby is that the reason that most parents aren't raising their children is because it is harder than having a 9-to-5 job. I know for myself that I work part-time, so I work like 2 days out of the week for like 5 hours each one of those days, and that's my mental respite. That's the time that I don't have to be like constantly having these little mental check-ins like, where's the baby? Where's the baby? What's he doing? Is he in trouble? Like, do I need to be watching him? Is he okay? Like, it is emotionally and mentally exhausting to be looking after an infant or a small child. And that's why most people choose to go ahead and go back to their jobs where they have things, where everything's more structured, where, they don't have to take any of the worries home with them for the most part, or if they do, everything is a lot more predictable and you're not usually worrying about like life or death all the time. And I get it, and I definitely, there was a large draw at parts of my life to go ahead and pursue like a career over doing family stuff, and our society definitely encourages that more than choosing to be a stay-at-home parent. And I'm not even saying that like it matters specifically if it's like the woman or the man that stays home. I think ideally it's the woman, because you make baby food out of your boobs and men can't do that, and they're also not, as a general rule, as good at taking care of infant hygiene and things of that nature. It's just, I don't want to sound sexist, but it's easier. It's just easier as a woman to do that infant care, at least. And I hope that people start to just kind of think about it more now that they have their kids at home and they're seeing that they have had not as much of a positive influence as they wish they had on them, and now they don't know if they like their children anymore. Because if you're not living with them and working with them on a day-to-day basis, and you're basically letting them be babysat by somebody most of the time, then they're not going to have a compass when it comes to good and bad behavior as much as somebody who has, you don't want teachers to be, trying to teach your children morals, or at least I don't. But if you're not doing that at home, then your kids are kind of just, figuring it out on their own, and you can't blame them for not doing great all the time. And so I hope that parents that are having a hard time being at home with their kids now and are realizing that they wish they had put in the time when their kids were little to make sure that they ended up being people that they enjoyed spending time with and the other adults enjoyed spending time with. I hope that they realize now that maybe it is a good idea to start investing time in the people that they love the most. And I think that the thing that we can all remember is that you'll never regret raising your own kids. You'll never look back. I don't think it is likely that you would ever look back and be like, gosh, I wish I didn't spend those, first 3 years just having a good, solid connection with my kids.